Welcome to another Voice Essentials Specialist session. My name is Dr. Dan, and it's my great pleasure today to do our fourth specialist session with a guy that I've known for a number of years. I have a lot of respect for him as a music producer, composer, arranger, and we might even get to talk about how he kicked off as a vocalist and guitarist and all-round good guy. Let's have a chat with Caleb James.
Sound check. Check one, check two.
Okay, I'm rolling. All right, fellas. You ready to do this?
Yep.
Let's go.
Feel like coming to work on a Monday. Fuck you, I said. You can do it all again. Well, we'd all do the same. I'll do it again if I have to. Hey Caleb, how you doing?
Fantastic, always good, mate.
Always good.
Yep.
So, Caleb, you've been in this music industry thing for quite some time. What's your bag of tricks right now? What are you right into?
Well, these days it's changed a bit. So, I spent a good 20 years producing, writing, performing, touring, the regular grind of a musician trying to generate a full-time living out of it. And I've got a couple of small girls now, so the main difference is touring doesn't really work so well for family. So these days I'm actually heading up. I've created and I'm running the composition courses for a small one for South Bank Conservatorium and all the main ones for the popular music program at Gold Coast Griffith.
Okay.
So it's keeping me on my toes, but I'm still running the studio. I've got a young guy down there now that I'm mentoring, and he's helping out with jobs there, obviously when I can't be there. And I'm still running projects and mixing and producing and always writing songs, never stop writing.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you, I first got to know of you when we were kind of both at the con as students back in the 90s or something,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit scary to think about. And you were doing the sonology course, but of course I also knew that you were quite an accomplished singer, and you had a band going. And
sit yourself on the curb with your cigarette. Bring yourself to my side and let's talk for a while. So you're stuck on the edge and you're tired and young. You're too scared to live inside, 'cause you're down on the outside. You may be young and criticized, it's never easy. Try to forget your pride, you better believe me.
tell us about how you got started into the industry.
At the risk of using a giant cliche, I think there is a part of it that's just in the blood in my family. So my dad and a few generations back, not that they were professional musicians, but music was a part of that side of my family. My dad's an accomplished pianist, and he can sing okay, and he's written a few songs, not too many, but an accomplished pianist, and he started me when I was about 5, I think, on piano. So it was around, I grew up around it all the time. I grew up listening to some amazing records I didn't know at the time how amazing they were, but when that stuff's going into you subconsciously, you can't help at some point in your life, either you just continue to listen to it, or if you are creatively inclined, you start to generate that stuff. So obviously my dad gave me a choice when I was about 12 or 13 to either keep going with piano or stop, and I, maybe preempting rebellious stage, said I'd stop piano started playing guitar because I thought that would be a more rock and roll thing to do, and of course Dad was stoked because I was now learning a second instrument, so it backfired. But yeah, obviously as soon as I had the guitar, I started being able to play everywhere. I could just take a guitar with me, so I started writing, and then obviously once you've written some songs, there is a point where I think most people get to where you want to risk playing them in front of someone, you know, because you generally have a bit of a self-inflated belief as a teenager that your songs are the best ever, right? They were terrible. My songs were terrible. I was a terrible singer and I was a terrible guitarist. A good pianist, but terrible at everything else. But had a fairly strong self-belief that I was going to change the world, of course. So that kind of led to forming some high school bands and just bashing it around. And we actually got fairly decent fairly quickly. We were rehearsing at least 3 times a week for hours and hours and hours. So I started actually playing in pubs when I was 15, I think. So we'd get, we'd have to sneak in. Obviously, we weren't allowed to have a drink because the proprietor would get very cranky. But we were just there to play music. So we would play, the really early opening support slots for some other bands. And I don't know, I loved it. Loved the whole grind of lugging the gear and the lights and waiting around and that, the building of adrenaline before you go on stage to play to 6 people.
What was the name of your band?
Oh, there was heaps. So please don't judge me. I'm watching your face if you judge me, Dan. The first one was a band called The Mutants.
The Mutants?
Yeah, then it was Judith Sunrise. And then I played in, I think basically from when I left school to when I was maybe 24, I was generally in about 4 or 5 bands at once. So I've played in a lot of bands over the years. Been really heavily involved in particularly the Brisbane scene, but the Aussie scene as well.
Yeah, okay. And you mentioned that there was a lot of listening that you did as a younger person. So what were some of those albums that you were listening to that? I often say to my students, music is not just about the doing. A lot of music is about the listening, and it's so important, isn't it, that input that we take into ourselves, and really important in those early years. So what were those albums that you were imbibing, ingesting?
Well, there's all the classic stuff like the Beatles records, pretty much the entire Beatles back catalogue, and then you've got the Who, the Stones, Gordon Lightfoot, James Taylor, Fleetwood Mac, Mamas and the Papas, Simon and Garfunkel, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Neil Young, you name it, like Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Eric Clapton, Yardbirds. It just goes on and on and on. There's just classic records. And even some more obscure, well, I call them obscure for me now, but probably at the time they were a bit more prominent for my dad. But there was, I can't even remember the names of them now, but he used to play some other records that were kind of these crossover between classical, because that's where he's come from, obviously, classical stuff and popular music. And I never really connected to that when I was younger. But those classic records have stayed with me my whole life, and in my teenage years, I'm sure most guys and girls do this, is you kind of try to move away from your parents' music, and instinctively you come back and realise it was actually seriously awesome. and what do I know? As if I've got the ultimate taste. The truth is that my dad.
The cloud of teenagerhood lifts.
Yeah, and it's scary and humbling, and you either staunchly stick to your beliefs as if you know it all, or you just accept it and take it on the chin and go, no. Actually, my dad played rad records, and they've really impacted me in a good way. So I'm very fortunate, very fortunate.
Yeah, okay. So tell me, what was it about? So you started off as a performer, quite obviously, and it sounds to me that you were, really into it, loving the gigging lifestyle, so to speak. What was it that caused you to make the decision to go into sonology, as opposed to going in as an instrumentalist and doing academia as a performer?
Well, yeah, the interesting thing for me, I'm a bit of a anomaly in that respect because most of the guys I grew up with lived for playing live. So live for me was just a chance to test out songs. So even to this day, if you gave me a choice of being in the studio every day or performing live to 10,000 people every day, I would still pick the studio. There's the magic for me is songwriting, bringing something to life that that has a power and impacts people. The inconsistency of the live environment actually frustrates me. I love being able to shape and steer people on a journey, and you can still do that live. Obviously you can do that live, but the inconsistencies will start to rub on me over time. So even when I first started writing songs at home, the bit that really excited me was recording on these cassette tapes. I had a dual cassette deck, and I'd record one part on one side, move that over, you know, dub to the other side, and record the new part on top, and then keep swapping them back. So, you know, and obviously the quality by the end was like, but
don't we refer to that now as, you know, that warm vinyl sound?
Possibly, maybe at a stretch if I squint my eyes and my ears, yeah. But that was the bit that I actually would look forward to the most. Is I'd write a song, and the minute those little cassette tapes, as cheap and dodgy as they were, the minute they were spinning around, and I knew I was putting something down that I could listen back to, that was where the power was for me. So the performance stuff has always been an expression of sorts, and I think I'm just musical by nature, so any avenues I've got to test that out and to test myself, I embrace.
You did the sonology course. You completed that up, and did you go about stepping into working in another person's studio, or did you immediately get into working in your own stuff?
No, again, that's a bit more unusual too, because particularly the time I was coming through was on the tail end of the traditional model, which is you go and you assist at a big studio and you work there, you cut your teeth, and then one of those engineers moves on and you fill the role. That's the traditional model anyway. When I went to study, I was already producing full-time, so the crazy thing, this is again credit to my dad, but when I took a supermarket job when I left school, and this is probably a common story for a ton of people listening even right now, if you're doing music you have to find a way to pay the bills, obviously, right? So I went and did a supermarket job. My plan was I'll work there for 6 months, save up some money to buy some really sweet gear to play with my band, some even better amps, guitars and some keyboards and whatever, and then we'll hit the road and of course, you know, change the world and be famous. And then you realise pretty quickly that it's not that simple, and even the bands that appear to be successful overnight, there's normally a lot of years and a lot of hours and a lot of grind behind that.
And a lot of debt.
Yeah, a lot of debt, a lot of, I mean, you never get back the money you put in those early years, but that's not the point, you know. The point is that it's a drive and a passion, and you have to do it, it's a compulsion. So I was, basically I'd get up and work from 8 till 5 at the supermarket, and then from about 6 o'clock at night till 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd be jamming with different bands or playing gigs pretty much every night of the week. So I didn't sleep for about 5 years. And I remember the turning point for me was one of the ladies I worked with at the supermarket came up to me really excitedly and said, "Caleb, in 2 weeks you're going to get your 5-year badge." And it horrified me. And I went and handed in my notice that day because I was that freaked out that 5 years had gone past. And I've been doing a lot musically, like still producing a lot at night and on the weekends and playing heaps of music and writing a lot of music. But the fact that that much of my life had been taken by something that was just supposed to pay the bills freaked me out. So I went to my dad and said, I want to start doing this production thing more seriously. And he cleared one of his credit cards, which is a big deal because my folks didn't have a lot of money. I think he got the limit raised and he cleared it, and I think I had 10 grand or 12 grand, I can't remember. And I went out and maxed it out. I was really smart. I thought about what's the most bang for buck I can get, and I set up my little studio in the rumpus room under my parents' house. And then went about paying my dad back as quickly as possible. And there's something about committing to your artistry on that level. At some point you've got to put your money where your mouth is. And when you do that, your body follows, your actions follow, because you have to pay the person back. Either it's the bank or it's your parents or it's a maid or whatever. And if you're an ethical person, which I am, I have to pay my dad back because I love and respect him. So I busted my hump. I just went out to tons of gigs and just talked to every band. Hey, do you want me to record you? I'll do a discount. I'll do the first song for free. I'll do the next couple, for a discount, whatever. And I paid them off in, I think, about 2 months. And then a few records that I'd been working on started getting a lot of radio play.
Wow.
And it kind of picked up from there. But even if all those records had got radio play, if I hadn't committed at that point, I wouldn't have had the ability, the time or the facilities to keep it going. So that was kind of the beginning. I'm
sure it's not everyone's story, but it's a common story I think for musicians. There comes a juncture, a fork in the road where a decision has to be made. I was interviewing Mel Forbes, who's was as a part of the specialist sessions, and she's, for those of you who are watching and want to catch up with that, just go looking for Melissa Forbes specialist session. But she was saying she was a lawyer, and she got to a point where she just hated it, but she was also doing this music thing, and she decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And we talked about choosing that moment, that critical moment on when is it right to make that step, and I think that's different for everyone. But obviously for you, that 5-year badge, that you would have, for some people you would have worn it proudly. For you, that was a real turning point. And also Melissa said that she couldn't have done it without the support of a husband, and for you couldn't have done it, I don't think, from what you're saying, without the support of your dad.
No, not as quickly as I did. I could have. I mean, because potentially the only other choice was at that stage to get a personal loan, which is the interest on it back then. The interest rates were not what they are now; they were crazy. And for a young, unproven person, there's all these extra penalties they put on. And the only other choice was, I stick it out at the supermarket for longer and save my money to buy the gear, but that would have just destroyed my soul. I think when it's that clear in your mind, I think you just have to find a way. It's not about being stupid and foolish, but there's also, I think there's a measure of foolishness sometimes in being so careful and so planned and waiting for everything to be right that it's never right and you never actually act on what you should be doing in the first place. And like I said, there's this kind of balance between you have to really do it when you feel you're physically and emotionally capable, because it's tough. But when you are, commit to it, and your body and your mind and your actions follow, and you tend to find ways to get paid that weren't even on the radar before, So I started doing, writing some music for some commercials and some things like that, because I had mates doing that in that field. And the minute that they knew I was doing music full time, I started getting these phone calls. Well, now you've got some time. Can you throw a day aside and write a song for this for this whatever. And some of those paid me crazy money. And they helped me set up the studio so then I could record a band that had almost no money that I really believed in and I just wanted to support, and that they could pay me virtually nothing, and I'd kill myself for 2 days for a commercial and that would cover, you know. So all that dancing, there's always ways to live it out, and it is hard. It's not an easy road, but for anyone who's watching us converse now and you've got that, it's not just a little passive interest in music or being creative, it's a burning, deep down core of who you are. You have to do something. There's a way to do it, but it does require some serious bravery and a lot of stamina, because it won't happen in a week. It's going to be years. Yeah,
it's the music industry is such a convoluted pathway, and there's so many different ways into it, but there's always brave decisions that need to be made. But I love the comment you made. You know, you don't want to make stupid decisions. It's got to be wise. And you are now you're teaching at the con, as you said, but you're also you're doing a lot of recording. We're friends on Facebook, and I constantly see new gear being purchased, and new toys and what have you, and a lot of it's obviously focused on you getting a better product for whoever you're doing work for. When you're let's focus in on singing, given that
absolutely
that's kind of what this is all about. When you're recording voice, what are some of the things that you go looking for with a singer? What are some of the skills that a singer needs to develop when it comes to stepping into a recording studio and putting their voice to tape?
There's some absolute key things that I look for, and to be honest, before I even let them stand in front of the microphone, they have to sing for me a la natural in the space, either in the studio or in their rehearsal room, or wherever we meet up to do some pre-production. And at that point, while we're focusing on the songs, I'm getting the songs to a point where they're ready for them to spend their money on. I'm always listening, particularly to the drummer and the vocalist. The drummer holds the band together. The vocalist is what everyone listens to, whether that's a guy or a girl, doesn't matter. That's the thing that holds the art together and communicates the message. So there's some key things that I'm always listening for. One, and if I phrase this in a way that you think you can phrase more correctly and more succinctly, please do it over the top. But
sure.
For me, one of the things I find really challenging for singers coming in is there's kind of two schools of singers that I deal with a lot. Completely untrained, that come in and they just have a wonderful natural tone sometimes, but their stamina is really poor in front of the microphone. So they tend to maybe get a couple of really great takes out and you still haven't quite got what you need, but they're dying. Or you can get one song out of them in a day, which means that you're, trying to rearrange an entire recording schedule around a fairly undisciplined and weak technically I'm talking, vocal approach, Now that can be really problematic, particularly in terms of budget and time. And for anyone watching, that's obviously most singers at some point want to record. The way you need to maximise your money in the studio should be something you think about before you even hit it, and that includes some of the protection techniques that I know that you're a big fan of, and some now I totally agree with all the ones that you're using. They're fantastic. Protection techniques, so you can actually get 3 more takes, then you can sing more takes in that beautiful space that you get into, the right headspace. You can give the producer 2 or 3 really great takes, and that's job done on that song. So the idea for me is I'm listening for feel and performance over anything else. Now the other school of singer that I get is the overtrained, and this is the bit where you can please clarify for me. In my mind, and part of this was going to the conservatorium when we went through together, but classically trained singers and operatic singers, so that have a very specific homogenous approach to singing, don't translate well in the studio, because some of those styles come from a long way back where they're designed to be done off stage, where you have some physical interaction with the audience. So it's more about projection than it is about, and obviously emotion as well, but the emotion has visual cues to fill in for any of the flatness of volume or dynamic, because they're actually just trying to get volume off stage. The problem in the studio is those delicate moments, which are the ones that really translate on speakers and in headphones, are the ones that are never being used by them, because if say they're in the bottom 50% of their energy, they're always above that.
Yeah, okay.
So one of the first things I listen for is dynamic range when someone's singing in front of me. Where are they sitting? And I test them out, so I'll get them to sing it quieter to me. Sing that whole verse quieter. Sing the verse into the chorus as quiet as you can. Sing it loud. Sing the whole thing loud. Sing it quiet to loud. Sing it loud to quiet. And I test how they're switching between those different modes of their voice, because the expression and the performance in the studio, you imagine if I'm, singing in front of you now and I'm doing some fantastic actions, I can sing 20 or 30% less effectively emotionally, and my physical appearance and interaction will make up the difference. On the speakers, you don't have that.
No.
It has to be as close to the money in terms of feel as possible. So perfect pitch is not great feel. Perfect timing is not great feel. So there's this expression and development of individualism that gets lost when you're overtrained.
Yeah. We're kind of stepping into the realm now of, if we could use it as a segue to quickly just talk about the whole, melodyne, auto-tune issue that seems to, I don't know, raise its head again every now and then. And you would have thought that we were kind of beyond this discussion. The reality is everyone's auto-tuned these days. Everyone's, having their voice tweaked. And I think the reason I say to students before, if I'm prepping a student to go into a studio, I always talk about the most important job of the singer is to put emotion to tape. Yeah. There's so much else that can be added. You can tune the bad note. You can't add emotion. You can't add feel. And what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. So the general rule of thumb is if I get a singer in that's maybe not recorded or just recorded a couple of times, which is still very early in development, even if they've recorded a full album before, it's still, there's some things I've learned, but it's early on. It's very, very rare that the first one or two takes are the ones. They have adrenaline attached to them, they have an energy attached to them, but the feel, if you listen to the vocal by itself, for example, it might be fantastic, but it has to connect to the song that's been recorded. Now and then that's what I was talking about before, there's a requirement for the singer to be able to flex and bend their tone and dynamics to perfectly marry their performance into what they're hearing in their headphones. So a skilled producer will build their production around the vocalist. That's why I'm listening to the vocalist and the drummer when I do my pre-production sessions, and I will, in my mind, have these immense stacks of Tetris blocks going on that the band's not even aware of, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to build it around this vocalist to make their job a bit more natural when they come to perform. But there's things like, even when we do that, songs evolve in the studio, and when they're on the microphone, they might be singing fantastically how they've sung it in the rehearsal room, but then I have to settle them down sometimes, or get them to not sing so quietly because they're singing in their bathroom at home where they generate very little energy. I'm saying, I need you to give me 20% more. And the minute you do that, their muscle memory is used to a certain type of positioning and energy and effort. And the minute you're below or above that, they kind of, they lose their confidence and their kind of spark for a bit. So you have to help them rediscover that. But that's the flexibility I'm talking about. And when you're overtrained, as in years and years and years of not learning other types of singing or expanding your repertoire, that really narrow focus is your enemy in the studio, because it's so hard to bend. It's so hard to go where the song needs you to go, which directly affects what you were just talking about before. That emotional connection is lost. So
what would you be advising? And I've just had a look at the time. We've been going for 26 minutes already, and there's so much more I'd want to talk to you. And maybe we can do this again in the future. We'll do Caleb James Part 2. So we do need to think about wrapping up. So I do want to ask, in relation to what you've just talked about, what are some things that you would advise the developing singer to do before they step into a studio? What are you suggesting? What skills can they develop? Because working in a studio is such a defined skill. I often say to students, you know, look, you can have all the performance, you know, live performance experience all you like.
Yep.
You're about to step into a completely different environment that takes the development of new skills. So what do you advise singers to do to develop those skills?
The two key things is dynamic variance, being able to sing generally in 3 modes. So for me, there's that, and that's probably the wrong terminology really, but I've always called it that head voice, very light tone, mid voice, which is a blend between, you know, your chest and your head voice, and then pure chest tone. You should be able to switch in and out of those whenever you desire. You know, if there's a build up to a chorus where it really needs to lift, and if you're singing that 100%, that's not a build. If you're singing it too soft, it feels disconnected from the music. You need to be able to ramp through and ramp down through those different energy points, and not even ramp, be able to switch between them to express without your visual cues. It's just on speakers, so that people at home get it. They feel the power and the change in your emotional state by the choices you're making dynamically. And that takes a lot of practice. You know, that break point in your voice, you should be able to be so smooth up and down over that, and dance back and forward over that line without having anything sound unnatural.
Yeah. So we talk about those as being transitions, those transitions through your registers. Yeah, great.
Exactly. The other thing for me too is finding your own individual approach to singing. So I'll try and do this in 20 seconds. I know we're really tight for time. A good example I can speak, this is really humbling for me personally, but I listened to a lot of heavy music when I was trying to get away from my dad's music in my mid-teens. And I still like it occasionally, but generally I'm a folky at heart. You know, I like sad songs. Now I started to try and sing some of that in some of the bands I was in, and I destroyed my voice. So I actually bled from my throat at 3 or 4 different gigs, and I couldn't talk for about 2 weeks after it. Now, you know how damaging that is, right?
Yeah, that's called a vocal fold hemorrhage, my friend, and that's not good.
No, so there's 2 things going on there. Besides the damage to my voice, physically I wasn't trained to do that, but even without the damage, I listen back on speakers, and it doesn't marry with who I am.
Yeah.
As a performer and as a creative being, you have to make decisions at some point. You can't sing everything. And in fact, I don't know a single person on the planet that can sing everything and be as compelling in every style or every feel or dynamic range.
100% agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so and that requires some humility and eating your own words sometimes. And then also separating as a singer. I like listening to this, but I don't sing that stuff very well. And it's not about, oh no, if you train harder, you'll be able to sing it. That's true to a point, but there's always a natural tonality in people's voices that suits certain things. And that's not to say you can't dance on the fringes of that. But when I locked down and realised I'm actually a sad, kind of more epic emotional singer. So, and I'm not talking loud screaming stuff. I'm just talking the tonality of my voice suits emotive, sad music. And I do that very well. So I've stuck to that. And there's lots of people that can technically outsing me. But if I'm singing side by side with someone on stage, I can evoke a hell of a lot of emotion because I understand who I am as a singer, and I've customized my techniques around that.
It comes back to what I'm often saying, not only here on Voice Essentials, but with my own students in the studio, and that is singing has never been about perfect notes. Singing has always been and will always be about communication.
Yeah, well, if you think, even with my students, I talk about, if you go back to sort of modern recording. So you go back, 1800s, music in rural areas, which is where a lot of modern kind of folk and expressive music came from. Music in those areas was about passing on cultural stories from city to city, from village to village, from town to town, and that's how they would communicate what was important in their area to the people growing up, the kids growing up, and people coming through their area. You didn't worry about singing it perfectly or the perfect timing. The key was, I have to get this message across in an authentic way so they understand their context.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the lines, that's gotten lost for a lot of people. They don't understand that. So perfection is the antithesis of that. It actually robs the core message and power.
I love that, because another thing that I say to my students is there is no room for perfectionism in art.
Yep.
The moment you are aiming for perfectionism, you've already lost.
Well, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So.
Not from a biological instrument, at least.
Sound check.
Yeah.
Hey, we do need to wrap it up. So I've got 3 questions, quick fire questions that I want to throw at you. The first one is, tell us about your worst ever performance experience.
The blood and throat, yeah, for sure. It was really primal, and the room exploded, but so did my vocal folds. So that was awful, and that was a turning point and scared me a lot.
Yeah, that would freak that would freak any singer out.
Yeah.
But
you can't say I wasn't committed though, right?
You bled for your art, brother. I
literally
don't
did.
encourage any singer to ever do such a thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is, what is your favourite vocal exercise personally? What do you... Is there a go-to exercise that you've used in the past that's helped you vocally?
Sirens are a big one because of that transition thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But sirens and anything where you're warming up, preventing onset, glottal attack. So just ramping in and out of words and generating that ability to start a note sharply or softly. That combined with your transitions is an amazing range of powers at your disposal. And the other one for me too is just mouth stretching, rolling tongue and the old horse lips and things like that. They're pretty much my go-to.
You're not going to get away. You're not going to get away with just describing it. You better give us the horse lips. What do we?
Don't do that. You know the horse lips. I'm sure you use it. That one. Yeah.
Yeah, lip bubbles. Yeah,
Yep.
Very good. And
So
lip
that's
bubbles are great to do on sirens. Yeah, fantastic. And finally, what's your top piece of advice for the developing singer? What if you were seated next to someone, just say you're seated next to them at a wedding and they're a young singer and they find out, hey, you're a music producer with a lot of experience, and they say, what's something I can walk away with from our conversation? What's the number one thing you would want to say to me?
I'd probably end up talking to them for about an hour, but because we've got about 2 seconds, I still think, honestly, the most important thing is not to compare yourself you can compare yourself technically to other singers, but don't mimic them as if that's the example of how that person should sing. So, for example, if you came to me and asked me that, and your favourite singer was a particular person, I'd say, listen to that person, be inspired by them, but you are not that person. So find your own voice. Be okay with being who you are vocally. But don't be lazy about it, obviously. So find your identity and just work hard around it. That's really it for me.
That's fantastic. I mean, throughout our conversation today, so much of what you've said has resonated with me personally and what I teach. And so it's no wonder that I like, watching what you're doing. And I've sent a couple of clients through to you, as you know, and the product that you've always produced is just always, outstanding.
Very kind, thank you.
And your price point is neat as well, which is very good.
It's the realities of the new industry.
Yeah. Mate, thank you very much for joining us on the voice. I'm just trying to get myself ready here on the what do we call these things? What am I calling this? The specialist sessions.
Yeah.
It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Caleb James, music producer, composer, arranger, all-round good guy. And he's just given us, if you've been listening carefully, he's given us so many gems to work with. And that's my hope here at Voice Essentials, is to develop your voice and improve your sound. And if you'd love to keep getting more of these sorts of videos and information, then make sure you hit the subscribe button, because I want to keep bringing you the most latest and greatest information from people all over the world, professionals in the field, not just music producers, not just singing teachers, but other vocalists, a whole range of professionals who really have a lot to offer. And more often than not, as we've just heard with Caleb, they're incredibly generous with their time and expertise. Until I see you in the next Voice Essentials video, I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.